I didn't know what I was getting into. At first, it sounded like the ultimate night, Diddy's exclusive freak-off party. Word on the street was that the who's who of hip-hop and entertainment would be there. A wild night in a mansion full of music, mystery, and mayhem. The kind of thing you'd only hear about in rumors. But this was real. I was with my girls, Tasha, Keisha, and Lala. We were all about it. We'd grown up in the city, known for our style, our swagger, and our way of moving through any scene. Nothing scared us. Not even the invite from that random number that came through on Tasha's phone. We didn't ask questions. When an opportunity like this came, you just went. We pulled up to Diddy's mansion at midnight. The house was enormous, all black marble and steel, like some Gothic palace. The gates were wide open, but as we drove through, it felt like the walls were closing in around us. People were already everywhere, mingling, but the vibe was off. The music pulsed like a heartbeat, deep and hypnotic. The crowd, it was a weird mix of people from the streets and high society, but everyone had the same look on their faces, vacant, like they weren't really there. Tasha led the way, already throwing her head back with laughter. She was always the boldest of us. Keisha and Lala weren't far behind, both of them talking about which rapper they'd see, which ones they'd be seen with. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Inside the mansion, it felt like stepping into another world. The lights were low, flickering between neon shades, casting long shadows on the walls. The bass was so heavy, I could feel it vibrating through my chest. The crowd moved in sync with the beat, but their eyes, they weren't dancing like normal people. Their eyes were dead, and that's when I started to feel it. Like we weren't just at a party, we were in a party. Keisha, who'd been too busy checking out the guys on the dance floor, grabbed my arm. "Girl, you feeling this?" I swear, it's like the music's pulling me in. I can't stop moving. I nodded but didn't answer. I was too busy scanning the room, looking for something familiar. That's when I saw her, the stripper. She wasn't like the ones at regular clubs, throwing it back for cash. This woman had an air about her that made everything around her freeze. She was tall, long limbs, skin like warm honey, but her face was wrong. Her eyes locked with mine across the room, and I felt it, the pull. Like she was seeing something I couldn't, something dark. I tried to look away, but her gaze was like a magnet. Tasha was already pushing through the crowd, her eyes glossed over, her body moving as if it wasn't her controlling it. "Yo, what's up with you?" Keisha asked, grabbing my arm as I stood frozen. "You look shook." I couldn't explain it. It was like the stripper had cast a spell on the room, on me. The energy shifted again, and suddenly the music wasn't just a beat. It was inside my head. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a presence, a force. "Let's hit the bar," Lala said, snapping me out of my trance. "I need something stronger than this." She motioned toward the glass in my hand, and I barely realized I was holding it. My vision blurred as I lifted it to my lips, and before I could stop myself, I drank it all. The taste was strange, like something chemical mixed with sweetness. Within seconds, my head spun, and that's when I felt the shift. The room got darker, colder, and the people around us, they weren't people anymore. They were standing still, their eyes glazed, staring at us like they were waiting for something, waiting for me. "Let's go now," I said, grabbing Tasha's arm, pulling her toward the door, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were wide, dilated, and she was swaying. The stripper, that woman, was moving toward us like she knew exactly where we were. "You see her?" I said, trying to tug Tasha away, but she was shaking her head, laughing. "You're tripping, girl. She's just a stripper. Ain't nobody got time for that." But I knew something was wrong. I turned to see Keisha and Lala weren't behind us anymore. They were with the crowd now, caught in the spell of whatever was happening. I pushed forward, but I couldn't get past the people. They weren't blocking me. It was like the space between us had thickened, like the air was heavy with something dark. I couldn't breathe. The stripper was closer now, and the closer she got, the more real the dread became. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile you trust. Her teeth were too sharp, too pointed, and her skin was wrong. Like it wasn't even human. "Come with me," she whispered, and her voice slithered into my head. My body wouldn't respond. It was like the music had infiltrated my brain, and my thoughts weren't my own anymore. But somehow, I pushed through, forced myself to break free from the pull. I grabbed Tasha again, this time dragging her toward the exit. That's when I saw the others. They were all in it. The crowd, the guests, the celebrities. They weren't just there for a good time. They were being absorbed. They were joining her, joining whatever dark force she was summoning. They weren't dancing anymore. They weren't drinking. They were waiting, as if they were just vessels for whatever she wanted. I didn't even see it happen, but in an instant, the door slammed shut, and the music stopped. Everyone froze, staring at me with hollow eyes. I turned to run, but the stripper was right behind me, her hand reaching out, cold as ice. And then I was outside, gasping for air, my lungs burning. Tasha, Keisha, Lala, they were nowhere to be found. The mansion was silent. The night was silent, like no one had ever been there. I didn't talk to my girls for weeks after that. None of us ever brought it up again. It was like we'd stepped into something we didn't understand, something that wasn't meant for us. And sometimes, when I'm walking down the street, I swear I hear the faintest bass line in the air. It's always followed by a whisper, a voice I can't quite place, but I know it's hers. You'll come back eventually. I'd heard the rumors. Diddy's freak-off parties were legendary, talked about in hushed tones in dark corners of the city. The people who'd survived them never spoke much about what went down, just that they were wild, and not in the fun way. When my friend Kira invited me to one, I figured it was just another high-energy night of dancing and drinking. I didn't know any better. The night started like any other. The location was kept secret until the last minute, but we were told to meet at this sleek downtown club. Inside, it was unreal. Plush velvet couches, the air thick with smoke, and music so loud it rattled your bones. People were wearing costumes, crazy outfits, and there was an energy in the air like everyone was competing to see who could be the wildest. But soon, it took a weird turn. Kira was already dancing with some friends, so I wandered off to grab a drink. As I made my way to the bar, I noticed a small group of people in the back corner. They were huddled around something, or someone. Curiosity got the best of me, and I approached. That's when I saw it. A man dressed like he was straight out of an old-school gangster movie was in the middle of the group. He was holding a gold-plated microphone, speaking in a low voice. He looked at me, and I swear, his eyes locked onto mine like he could read my thoughts. "You're here for the challenge, aren't you?" he said, like he already knew the answer. Before I could say anything, someone handed me a small metallic box. It was heavy, like it had something inside. The guy just smiled, nodding for me to open it. Hesitantly, I did. Inside was a small black velvet pouch. "You know the rules," he said. "Whoever can outdo the others gets a prize." The pouch felt strange in my hand, like it didn't belong there. As I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. Inside was a silver ring, but it wasn't just any ring. It was old, tarnished, and etched with symbols I couldn't understand. Something in my gut told me this wasn't right. I looked around, but the others were all smiling, like they were in on a joke I didn't get. The man nodded again. "Put it on, show us what you're made of." I didn't want to, but everyone was watching, and I didn't want to seem like I was backing out. So I slipped the ring onto my finger, and that's when everything changed. The lights in the club flickered, and the music warped. The bass became distorted, vibrating so violently it felt like the walls were closing in. I felt dizzy, like I was floating. Then I heard it. The sound of whispers, low and guttural, coming from every direction. The people around me didn't seem to notice. They just kept staring, their eyes wide and unblinking. I tried to take off the ring, but it wouldn't budge. I panicked, trying to pull it off with my other hand, but it felt like it was fused to my skin. That's when the whispers turned into voices. "You shouldn't have come," they hissed. "Now you're part of it." I looked around, but everyone was still frozen in place, watching me. The walls of the club were no longer walls at all. They were shifting, distorting, like I was trapped in a funhouse. And then, in the corner of my vision, I saw it. A figure, tall, cloaked in shadows, with glowing eyes. It was watching me, and I could feel its presence. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled backward, knocking over a table, but no one else moved. They were all staring at me like they were waiting for something. I don't know how long I stood there, feeling trapped in that nightmarish scene. But suddenly, the music stopped, the lights came back on, and I was standing in the middle of the club, sweating and gasping for air. The ring was gone, and so was the figure. Kira finally found me, dragging me out of the crowd. She kept asking what was wrong, but I couldn't explain it. She didn't remember anything strange happening. The moment we left the club, I realized something. My reflection in the windows was wrong. My eyes were different, like the ring had left something in me. I haven't been able to shake that feeling. Every time I close my eyes, I hear those whispers. And I'm sure of one thing. That party wasn't just a party. It was a trap.
It was the kind of night that felt too good to be true. One of those exclusive, secret parties that everyone in the city was talking about. Diddy's Freak Off was legendary, but no one really knew what went down. My friend Marissa begged me to go with her, saying, You have to see this for yourself. It's going to be insane. We arrive at this dark, towering mansion on the outskirts of the city. The vibe is electric, but there's something off. The music hits you before you even walk through the door. Deep thumping bass that feels like it's vibrating your bones. People in outlandish costumes are everywhere, drinking, dancing, and making crazy bets. But as we step further inside, I notice something weird. No one is smiling. It's almost like they're all just going through the motions, laughing a little too loudly, looking a little too eager. I brush it off, thinking it's part of the freak off vibe. But then things start to get strange. Marissa drags me to a back room where they're setting up this game. The host, a guy I didn't recognize but who everyone seemed to revere, gets up on a platform and announces that the party's not just about dancing or stunts tonight. He says we're here for something much more intense. I laugh nervously, but the crowd goes quiet, eerily so. He says, if you want to be part of the real fun, you have to prove you can handle it. His eyes lock onto mine for a second too long. Before I can even process it, he points directly at me. You're up, he says. I feel my stomach drop, but I don't have time to back out. The crowd parts as I'm pushed toward the center. There's a chair there, a plain old wooden chair in the middle of the room. He gestures for me to sit. I sit. The crowd is watching me, dead silent. Suddenly the room feels smaller, the air thicker. I hear the music, but it's distorted, like it's coming from far away, underwater. The host walks toward me slowly, his shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor. You'll make it through if you're strong enough, he murmurs, almost too quiet to hear. He's holding something in his hand now, a small silver key. I glance around. People are still staring at me, but their eyes don't look right. Wide, unblinking, like they're all waiting for something. The host bends down, placing the key on my wrist, like he's locking it into place. Then everything changes. The lights flicker, and the temperature drops sharply. I can see my breath in the air now. I'm frozen, unable to move. And that's when I feel it, a tug on my skin. Not from the key, but from inside. A strange, invasive sensation, like something is pulling me in, deep under the floorboards. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. The crowd is whispering, chanting something, but I can't understand the words. The floor beneath me starts to crack, and I look down in horror. There's a huge gaping hole opening up below me. The air smells foul, like decay. From the hole, something rises. A shadow, not human, but something else. I can barely make it out, but it's tall, its limbs too long, too twisted. Its eyes glow, but they're not eyes. They're pits of darkness. And then the whispers grow louder, like they're inside my mind, urging me to stand, to jump into the hole. My chest tightens, my vision blurs, and for a second, I almost do it. I can feel the pull, the darkness calling me, telling me this is where I belong. But before I can fall in, I hear a loud shout. Marissa's voice. She's there, dragging me out of the chair, yanking me back toward the door. The shadow is reaching for me, its fingers brushing against my leg as we stumble away. We don't stop running until we're outside, gasping for air. Marissa's shaking, asking me if I'm okay, but I can't respond. I can't stop looking at the mansion. It's no longer a mansion at all. It's a blackened, decaying structure, like it's decaying in real time. And that's when I realize it wasn't just a party, it was a ritual. And I'm pretty sure whatever I felt pulling me into that hole isn't done with me yet.
I had heard the rumors about Diddy's parties, but nothing prepared me for the night I actually got an invite. The text was simple: freak off at Diddy's. Meek Mill's gonna be there. Don't miss it. My friend Tara convinced me to go, saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to party with the stars. Little did I know, it would be a night I'd never forget for all the wrong reasons. We showed up to this massive mansion on the outskirts of the city, something straight out of a music video. The gates opened for us like we were VIPs. And as soon as we stepped inside, the energy was insane. People were dressed in everything from suits to outlandish costumes, dancing, drinking, and acting like they were in another world. I could already feel the vibe, electric, wild, almost too perfect. Tara and I hit the bar where Meek Mill was casually hanging out, talking to a small group of people. He was laughing, surrounded by bottles of liquor. But there was something strange in his eyes, like he wasn't fully there. The bartender, a guy who seemed to know everyone, handed me a drink with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This one's special," he said. "You'll love it." I took a sip, and the taste hit me like a punch. A mix of sweetness and something bitter, sharp. It wasn't just alcohol. It felt like it was sinking into my skin, spreading through my veins. My body started to feel light, like I was floating, but in a bad way. The room spun faster than it should have. I tried to shake it off, but Tara was already lost in the crowd. So I wandered off to the side of the room, trying to steady myself. That's when I saw Meek Mill again, but this time he wasn't laughing. He was standing alone by the window, staring into the dark yard like he was waiting for something. I went over to him, hoping to talk, but the moment I stepped close, I felt a chill, like I wasn't supposed to be there. He looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come. They're watching." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights flickered and the room went dead silent. The music stopped, and a strange, eerie noise filled the air. Like a low hum vibrating the walls, everyone in the room froze, not moving, not speaking. It felt like time had stopped. Then the whispers started. At first, they were soft, just voices in the background. But then they got louder, and the sound began to press in on me, like they were inside my head. "Join us, join us." The words repeated, getting louder, more insistent. Meek turned to me again, but his face had changed. His eyes were dark, almost black, like he was no longer the Meek Mill I knew. "It's too late," he said, his voice sounding far away. "They've marked you." Suddenly, I felt it. A cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. I whipped around, but no one was there. The floor beneath me felt unstable, like it was shifting, like I was sinking into the ground. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was rooted to the spot, and from the shadows, figures started to emerge, people who had been dancing, laughing, drinking. Now they were staring at me with hollow eyes, their skin slick with a dark, unnatural sheen. The same cold hand appeared again, this time gripping my arm, pulling me toward the door that led outside. Meek was gone, and as I stumbled through the mansion, I realized something terrifying. Everyone was staring at me, like I was the center of their attention now. No one was acting normal. It felt like the whole place had shifted into something dark, twisted, and wrong. I finally made it outside, gasping for air. The night was freezing, and Tara was waiting by the car, looking confused. She didn't remember anything that had just happened, but when I looked back at the mansion, it was different. The lights were flickering erratically, like something was about to break through the walls. I didn't stay to find out. The worst part? A few days later, I found a strange mark on my wrist, like a symbol carved into my skin. I'm not sure who did it or what it means, but I know one thing. After that night, I don't trust Diddy's freak-off parties. And I'm pretty sure I'll never look at Meek Mill the same way again. I should have known better, but when you're young, hungry for a taste of the high life, and someone like Diddy sends you an invite, you don't ask questions, you just go, even when the details are hazy, even when your friends warn you, telling you to stay away, telling you it's not worth the risk. But there I was, walking up to the front door of Diddy's mansion, the invitation still in my pocket. It was an exclusive freak-off party. The kind you hear about in whispers. The kind where music and madness collide, and the rules don't exist. Me and my girl, Layla, had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. The mansion was like a modern-day castle, huge and dark with a red carpet rolled out, and the whole place surrounded by a high stone wall. When we stepped inside, it was like entering a different world. The music throbbed deep in my chest. The bass so heavy, it felt like it could shake my bones. People were everywhere, but no one was talking. They were just moving, dancing. They were in their own world, their eyes glazed, like they were under some kind of spell. A bouncer nodded at us as we passed, as if he knew exactly who we were, and we didn't even have to show our ID. Inside, the party was alive with a strange energy. The air was thick, charged with something I couldn't place. People were laughing too loudly, their movements erratic and animalistic. The lights flickered in a dizzying array of colors. It felt almost surreal, like a dream, but not the good kind. We made our way to the bar. The bartender, a guy in a black suit, was busy preparing drinks. His movements precise, but his eyes were vacant. When he slid us our drinks, he didn't speak a word. The glass was heavy, the liquid dark and glistening. I noticed the strange shimmer in it, a hint of something I couldn't identify. "Bottoms up," Layla said, already taking a sip. Her voice was slurred, and when she looked at me, her pupils were huge. I hesitated for a second, the hairs on the back of my neck rising, but I drank it down too. It wasn't the first time I'd been to a party where drinks were handed out without question, but this was different. As the alcohol hit my system, the world around me started to spin. My vision blurred, and I couldn't quite keep my balance. I tried to steady myself, but my legs felt like jelly. Layla was already grinning at me, her teeth too white against her dark lipstick. She was lost in the crowd, in the music, in the vibe, whatever that was. That's when she appeared, the stripper. She stepped out onto the stage, but she wasn't like any stripper I'd ever seen. She moved like water, fluid and hypnotic. Her body was perfect, skin the color of warm honey, curves that should have been illegal. But it wasn't just her beauty that drew me in. It was something else, something darker. Her eyes locked with mine from across the room, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to freeze. It felt like she was reaching out to me with just a look. Her movements were slow, deliberate. Every twist of her body, every step she took toward the center of the room, felt like it was pulling me closer to her. The crowd around me was no longer dancing. They were staring, their faces pale, their eyes wide, fixed on her. And then I noticed something strange. None of them were moving anymore. It was like they were frozen in place. Watching her, my heart began to race, panic rising in my throat. I tried to pull my eyes away from her, but the pull was too strong. Her lips curved into a smile, and I could see it. Something was wrong with her teeth. They were too sharp, too jagged. She took another step toward me, her body undulating with every movement. Her hips swayed like they were in rhythm with something I couldn't hear, something that was making the very air feel thick, heavy. She stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could feel her breath against my skin, cold and wrong. I didn't want to move, but my body was no longer listening to me. "Come closer," she whispered. Her voice was smooth, like silk, but there was an edge to it, something unnatural. I tried to step back, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot. It was as if her eyes were chaining me to the ground. Her fingers brushed against my arm, and I felt a shock of cold, like ice running through my veins. I gasped, trying to pull away, but it was no use. "Join us," she said, her voice filling my mind, pulling me deeper. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. At that moment, I saw Layla again. She was still grinning, but her face was different. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, like they weren't even hers anymore. Her smile was frozen, unnatural. And then I saw them, the others, people who had been dancing moments before, who had been laughing, living, now stood completely still, staring at me. Their eyes were wide and empty like hollow shells. They were waiting for me to join them. The stripper's smile grew wider, revealing even more of her unnaturally sharp teeth. She stepped closer, her hand on my neck, and I felt a cold burn spread through me as she whispered in my ear, "You're already part of it. You just don't know it yet." Suddenly, everything went dark. I don't know how long I was out. I only remember waking up on the floor, the music still playing faintly in the background. I tried to sit up, but my head was spinning, my body aching like I'd been run over. I looked around, but the room was empty now, completely empty, like no one had ever been there, except for her. The stripper was still there, standing in the shadows. Her smile was gone, replaced by something far darker. She wasn't the same anymore. She was something else entirely. She took a slow step toward me, her eyes glowing, no longer human. "You're mine now," she said softly, her voice a hiss. "We all are." And that's when I realized I had already joined them. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, but the world felt different. I tried to call Layla, but she never answered. I texted her, but the text went unread. It wasn't until I went to the party again that I realized she wasn't there anymore. But sometimes late at night, I can feel them watching, and I know it's only a matter of time before they come for me again. The night of a lifetime. An invitation from a private number. Diddy's freak-off party. The message was clear. This was an event for the inner circle. You don't get those invites every day, especially when your phone's blowing up with rumors that A-list celebrities would be there. Diddy, Jay-Z, and a whole bunch of others. But the one that caught my eye was Lil Nas X. Word on the street was that he'd be at the party, and you know how that goes. whispers about him being more than just a rapper, but a trendsetter, a disruptor in every sense of the word. And here I was, about to step into a world of excess, glamour, and celebrity that most people only dream of. When we arrived at the mansion, the atmosphere was thick, so thick, you could feel it in your chest. The house was enormous, more like a fortress than a party pad, looming on the edge of the city. The music was low, almost hypnotic, the kind that vibrated in your bones rather than blasting through your ears. The neon lights flickered in strange colors, purple, red, green, but they didn't feel right. They weren't fun neon lights, they were dark. I was with a few friends, all of us excited but nervous. We'd been around celebrities before, but this felt different. The air tasted strange, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Inside, the scene was chaotic. People were dancing, laughing, mingling, but not in the way you'd expect at a celebrity party. It was almost too perfect. They weren't really interacting with each other. They were moving in sync, like they were all part of some bizarre choreography. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes blank, empty. We made our way through the crowd, looking for familiar faces. That's when I saw him, Lil Nas X, standing off to. I saw flashes of faces, not just from the party, but from all over. Ghostly figures whispering, calling, feeding off of us. This wasn't a freak-off party. This wasn't a celebration. This was a feast. Lil Nas X stepped closer, his grin now full of sharp teeth. His eyes were pitch black, and his skin seemed to glow unnaturally. "You're mine now," he said, his voice echoing in my head, pulling me deeper into the crowd. I felt my strength leave me, my will slipping away. I wanted to fight, but the pull was too strong. My vision blurred, and my limbs went limp. It felt like something was feeding off me, draining my very essence. And then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. I woke up outside, in the cold, gasping for air. The mansion was gone. The people were gone. The music, everything was gone. I had no idea how I'd escaped, but I knew one thing. I would never go near that place again. I would never chase the fame, the luxury, the lifestyle. It wasn't worth it. Not when you realize that some things are meant to consume you, to take everything you are. The next day, I checked my phone. Lil Nas X had posted a picture of himself with a caption. We got another one, and I knew, in that moment, I had barely escaped. It was one of those nights that felt too good to be true from the start. A random text from an unknown number. Diddy's freak-off party tonight. You in? There was no name, just the number, but the style, the phrasing. I knew this was an invite you didn't just ignore, especially in the world of nightlife and celebrity circles. I told my boy Marcus about it, and he was all in. He'd been talking for weeks about breaking into that world, the VIP parties, the high-end clubs. He wanted to rub elbows with the elite, and this was his shot. Me, I wasn't so sure. There was something in the air, a feeling that something about it was off, but I went anyway. I couldn't miss the opportunity. The mansion stood like a fortress in the middle of the city's outskirts, its dark, sprawling silhouette visible even from the street. The gates were wide open, a red carpet leading to the entrance, flanked by black SUVs and shining sports cars. The music was already spilling out the door, heavy bass vibrating the ground. We walked in, confident, but the moment we crossed the threshold, that feeling deepened. It wasn't just the usual club scene with the lights and music. It was suffocating, like the air was thick with something sinister. Inside, the vibe was different. Celebrities, influencers, the rich and powerful were scattered around, but they weren't engaging the way you'd expect. They were moving in slow, almost robotic patterns, as if they were following some unseen rhythm. People were laughing, but the laughter didn't sound real. It felt rehearsed, empty. We made our way toward the bar, but I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. Marcus was already looking around like a kid in a candy store, his eyes locked on everyone from Meek Mill to Lil Nas X, who was standing in the corner, talking with a few other men. His posture was confident, his usual flair for style intact, but something about his smile seemed forced. I pulled Marcus toward the bar, trying to calm my nerves, but as I passed, I noticed the eyes on us, on me. It was subtle at first, just a few glances from strangers, but it escalated fast. The air felt like it was thickening, heavier, as if I was being watched from every direction. Marcus grabbed his drink, leaning against the counter, his focus still on the crowd, but my attention was drawn elsewhere. Across the room, in a shadowed corner, I spotted Diddy, holding court with a few others. His face was sharp, his eyes hidden beneath dark sunglasses, and he wasn't dancing, wasn't mingling like the others. He was observing. The moment our eyes locked, I felt something shift. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. It was like a signal had passed between us, something unspoken but clear. Then, out of nowhere, a woman stepped into my view, tall, stunning, with jet black hair and eyes that gleamed with something darker than the night around us. Her voice was smooth, seductive. "You're here for the party, aren't you?" she asked, her gaze never leaving mine. I didn't know how to answer. She wasn't just a woman, though. I felt it, an energy around her that made her seem otherworldly, too confident, too controlled. But I nodded, unsure of what else to say. "Good," she whispered. "You'll fit right in." As the night went on, the atmosphere grew heavier. The music seemed to bleed into my thoughts, deepening the sense of unease. I tried to relax, to drink and dance like everyone else, but there was a growing pressure in my chest. People were acting strange, flirting, but not in the usual way. There was an edge to it, a hunger in their eyes that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just about sex. It felt darker, almost predatory. I glanced at Marcus, who was lost in conversation with a group of men, laughing, leaning in too close. It wasn't the usual way he interacted with people. There was an intensity in his body language, a certain inviting posture that felt out of place. But he wasn't the only one. Everywhere I looked, men were drawing closer to each other, their eyes sharp as if testing boundaries. In one corner, I saw a well-known athlete chatting with another man, his hand lingering just a little too long on his shoulder. The tension in the room had thickened to the point that I could barely breathe. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of game, the rules unknown, the whispered conversations, the touches that were too intimate, the slow movements. It all began to blur together, but then I saw it. Marcus had disappeared. The man he'd been talking to was now with someone else. I tried to call him, but my phone was dead. I rushed through the crowd, trying to find him, but every time I turned a corner, the scene seemed even more twisted. There were eyes following me, but they weren't curious or playful. They were hungry. I spotted Marcus again, this time in the back of the room, near a velvet rope. But something was wrong. He was no longer talking, no longer Marcus. He was standing still, his face blank, his body stiff. Then I saw the woman again. She was standing next to him, her hand on his chest, eyes locked with his. "You're mine now," she said, her lips curling into a smile. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a command. It was like a truth. Something in her voice told me it was already too late for him. "Marcus," I shouted, pushing through the crowd. He didn't respond. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't seeing me. He was staring into space, the light from the flashing neon reflections flickering across his face. The woman looked at me, then at him, her smile stretching into something unnatural. "It's too late for him," she purred. "It's too late for all of you." I grabbed Marcus's arm, trying to pull him away, but he didn't move. He didn't react. It was like he was already gone. And then I felt it, a hand on my shoulder, a breath on my neck. Diddy. He was behind me now, his presence suffocating. His voice was low, almost hypnotic. "You think you can leave. You think you can just walk out of this." His fingers curled around my wrist, sending a shock of cold through my body. I turned, but the room was closing in. The faces around me warped in a way that was almost grotesque. There was no way out. And then, as I stood there frozen, I realized the truth. This wasn't a party. It was a trap, a place to indulge, to give in to your darkest urges, to break your boundaries. But at the end of the night, you don't leave. You never leave. Everything after that was a blur. When I finally managed to break free, I ran. I left Marcus behind. I don't know what happened to him, but I never saw him again after that night. I won't make the same mistake again. Some invitations should never be accepted, because once you're in, you might never make it out.